So if you have a perception in your outer environment of some type of danger or threat, that the reaction or the response to that stimulation begins to activate the fight or flight nervous system. You're mobilizing energy to prepare yourself for that danger. And when the body perceives that danger, it's a big threat, it doesn't hold back on the amount of energy it's deciding to use. It goes all in. So for the short term, that's fine. But if you keep doing it over and over again, you keep knocking your brain and body out of balance. And that's what stress is. And the repetition of that, keep knocking the body out of balance, begins to weaken the organism. So when a person is perceiving a danger threatening their outer world and they turn on those adrenal hormones, they're putting all their energy for that threat in their outer world. There's no energy in their inner world for repair, for growth. So a person who's constantly feeling fear because they believe something out there is going to get them, then they're more susceptible to things in their outer environment, and their immune system is compromised. So they actually have more of a propensity for infections, for foreign agents or invaders, because now their body is reacting and constantly responding to the outer world. So our research shows that if you trade those emotions of fear, of worry, of anxiety, of any vigilance, and you can open your heart, and I know that that doesn't seem natural or normal during these times, but if not now, when? And if you can begin to feel gratitude and appreciation and settle your body into the present moment, 4 days of feeling an elevated emotion would actually strengthen your immune system by about 50%. We've done the research to show that once energy makes it into your heart, the body begins to, it's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the emotion you're feeling by thought alone and some emotion you would feel from some reaction in your environment. Your body in that state is beginning to believe it's safe enough to relax into the present moment. And so when that occurs, the immune system begins to upregulate, and it begins to make these antibodies. And those antibodies are the body's natural defense against bacteria and viruses. They're those shields that protect the body from foreign invaders. And 4 days of doing that, imagine if you practice doing that every single day. I think by working with your body and elevating your emotional state, you could literally become more resistant or more in a state of order, independent of your outer environment. There is no relative time, but I will tell you that you'd have to understand a little bit more about how the body works, not completely, but to get a better understanding, say, of gene expression, right? So most people have a reaction to something in their outer world, and when they have an event that has a strong emotional charge, the change in their internal chemistry causes them to narrow their focus on the cause of it. The brain takes a snapshot, and that's called a memory. And so the brain is kind of a record of past memories, and the body emotionally feels those memories. And so many times the signal emotionally from the event begins to select a gene that begins to downregulate. And every time the person thinks about the past event over and over again, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body. And stimulus and response, thought and feeling, image and emotion is conditioning the body into the past. So it begins to program the gene. And the gene starts to make cheaper proteins. It downregulates, and enzymes and hormones, and the body starts moving further out of balance. And so the person then thinks neurologically within the memory of that experience and feels chemically within those emotions, and how they think and feel is their state of being. So many times the gene starts to be activated after a strong emotional event. So then how could we then begin to change that gene expression? So it would make sense then if you could feel an elevated emotion and you could combine a coherent brain and there's a science to doing that, and we know how to teach people how to do that, with an elevated emotion and combine those two. And you can teach people how to be so present that they can begin to see a new future or imagine a new future. There comes a moment that if they did it properly, if they started feeling the emotion of that event before it took place. In other words, you can't wait for your healing to feel wholeness. You can't wait for some type of physical change to feel gratitude. That's living in separation or lack. That's waiting for something out there to tell you you're changed in order for you to feel that kind of separation or emptiness taken away. But if you start to feel the emotion, the stronger the emotion you feel from the inner event, the more you're going to pay attention to the picture in your mind. In a sense now, you're changing your brain and body from living in the past present reality to living in a future present reality. In other words, the stronger the emotion you feel, if the emotion of ecstasy or bliss or freedom is greater than the quotient of betrayal or shock or pain from the past, now the body is literally no longer in the past, it's in a new future. And the stronger the emotion you feel, instead of paying attention to the picture in your outer world, if you're truly in a state of meditation, your body is so objective that it's believing that that future event is happening in the present moment because you're feeling the emotion of that event. And that begins to select and instruct new genes, and genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of protein becomes the expression of life. And we have seen people have an inner event that transforms them to such a degree that all of the shock and betrayal that happened in their past, they look back at their entire past and they say, I don't want to change anything about my past because it brought me to this moment. I understand why I had to go through all of that to finally feel this. It was worth it. And they're betrayers, they're abusers. They have nothing but compassion and love for them. They're seeing it from a different level of consciousness, not from the same emotion. And the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom, and the person now no longer is living in the past. And so that's what we want people to experience. That inner event is so real that it replaces the circuitry, the gene expression of the past into a new program of the future. And the person will say to you, I know I'm healed. Many times they say that. You know, in order for that to happen, you're actually sending a signal, new information to your immune system to begin to become prosperous, to begin to grow, to begin to repair, to begin to gain more energy. And so the inner army becomes more abundant, it becomes more awakened, it becomes more alive. And that's when energy makes it into our heart and we feel more whole. And that's when we begin to reset the baseline of anxiety in our brain and body. And the immune system begins to really do its natural job. So that means then, when we're truly present and we add an emotional component, if you can do it in the present moment and stay present and repeat it over and over again, when the brain is in the present moment, it will not know the difference between the real life event of contracting your muscles and doing it in your mind. And your brain will begin to look like you've been doing it all along, and you begin to activate new circuits in your brain. And if you repeat it, you fire and wire it, more circuits, begins to create a neurological network, a new level of mind. So the research shows then that people who never played the piano before, you can divide them into two categories. And you can do a brain scan on one group of people and then set them in front of a piano and teach them one-handed scales and chords. And they come for 2 hours a day and they practice those scales and chords for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, they rescan their brain, and lo and behold, they grow new circuits on the opposite side of the brain. No magic there. You learn something new. Learning is making new synaptic connections. You get some instruction. You got to get your body involved. You get your body involved, you're going to have a new experience. Experience enriches the brain. Pay attention to what you're doing. You got to pay attention and stay present and repeat it over and over again, firing and wiring. You're going to assemble new neural architecture. You can take another group of people, have them close their eyes, and mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords for 2 hours a day for 5 days. Scan their brain before and scan their brain after. at the end of 5 days, they grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people who are physically doing it. Now, what that means is if you take those people and you set them in front of the piano without ever lifting a finger, they can play those scales and chords. Why? Because they primed their brain for a future behavior. So if you truly wanted to change some aspect of yourself, then you would have to ask yourself, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? Now,
Right.
the act of answering that question is going to turn on your frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe has connections to all other parts of the brain. And it's interested in answering that question because it is the creative center. So as it begins to scan the landscape of the brain, it can only gather information from things you've intellectually learned or things you've experienced in your life. And it begins to associate those different memories with the question. And when you get enough networks of neurons firing in your brain, you see an image or a picture. That's intention. And then as you begin to live and rehearse who you're going to be, you begin to do that exact same thing. You begin to install neurological hardware in your brain. Repeat it, it becomes a software program, and you begin to behave that way. Now the brain is primed. It's no longer a record of the past. It's a map to the future. Now the person can feel the emotions of their future. You're going to see a person move into a different state of being, and they're going to have all kinds of biological changes. And that begins to change their biology every single day. Some people do it faster, some people do it slower. But your muscle will get stronger. That's for certain.
Mm-hmm.
You will make more connections between your brain and that muscle. That's for certain. And then if you did specific physical exercises while you practiced the mental rehearsal, the physical demonstration of contracting those muscles begins to make more connections because of the experience. So now you're hitting it from both ends.